Liam Billingham.
I'm George Fragopoulos.
And this is
Oeuvre.
Busters.
How does our theme song go? Or is it? You have a T-Rex? Hi, we have a T-Rex.
They're moving in herds. They do move in herds. So, George, we're between seasons here.
We are between seasons.
We're between our John Cassavetes season,
And
which was season 1, and our Philip Seymour Hoffman season. And we're going to drop an episode. You can't see, but George and I are gesturing,
towards the future.
gesticulating towards the future. The future's so bright. I gotta wear shades. Cuffs? Remember that movie?
Yeah,
Christian Slater?
Yeah.
It's good. But we're...
As a palate cleanser,
if one can call it that, we wanted to talk about a movie that we've been wanting to talk to you, Keith, about for a while, and that
Thanks,
film
mate.
is Wanda, directed by...
I fucking love Wanda.
Keith.
Sorry.
It's okay. Wanda, directed by directed and starring Barbara Loden.
Yeah.
Wanda, directed and starring Barbara Loden.
From the magical year of 1970.
1970, the same year as
Star Wars.
John Cassavetes'
Husbands, yeah.
So that's an interesting, and also because this film was recently released by the Criterion Collection, and if you go to the Criterion channel, which you can get a free 1-month trial of right now,
I believe so. Yeah.
you can watch her interview with Dick Cavett. She did a short and pretty awkward
it is
interview
awkward. I texted
with
you.
Dick Cavett.
Did you also think it was awkward?
I thought it was pretty well.
Yeah. There were moments of it that are awkward, but we'll talk about it maybe at the end afterwards.
Let's talk about it at the end. So, George, how would you summarize...
Wait, can I just quickly say, please, Criterion, listen to your closet so we can get some free
Criterion,
DVDs.
we want to go into the closet.
Yeah, give us in the closet. Where would you go first?
What do you mean?
I mean, what would you pull down from the racks?
What would be my
shelves?
first Criterion
Yeah,
grab?
you know you're going in and you could grab, let's say, 10 things. But what's the first thing?
I have Pearls of the Czech New Wave box set already, and I have the Yugoslav Black Wave box set already. And there's not a lot of Bellatar that's on the
sound
Criterion.
of everybody turning off their podcast.
I like Yugoslav cinema and Eastern European cinema of the 60s and 70s.
Liam,
I'm a white man, George.
That's so fucking plebeian of you. Of course, that's what everybody would say.
You know, actually, they do, you know what I would grab? They just released Jan Nemitz's Diamonds of the Night,
okay,
which I would want to get.
And that is a
Czechoslovak New Wave film from the 1960s.
But I mean, tell us a little bit more.
I've actually never seen it, which is why I would want to grab it. But
I thought you were gonna go really esoteric and be like Hollis Frampton.
And actually, hopefully when this episode is released, BAM will still be doing its Vera Chaitilova retrospective, and they're showing Daisies, which is an incredible movie. All of her movies are incredible.
I do want to go check out some of that stuff.
You should go see some of that stuff. Well, that's off topic. What would you grab? Give me one film you'd grab.
Well, definitely Armageddon.
You're right.
Yeah.
RoboCop.
Is it RoboCop in the Criterion?
RoboCop's in the Criterion.
I mean, that actually does deserve to be.
Yeah.
Criterion.
Well, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Stop moving in your chair so much.
I would grab. I think I'd do like a Fassbender sweep.
Fucking God, he gives me a hard time about the Yugoslav Black Wave. Fucking Fassbender. No, I would too. That'd be great.
So
I would actually grab the Ingmar Bergman box set and the Kurosawa box set as well, because I have to live up to my reputation as a white man.
Of course, yeah. So one thing, maybe a couple of just prefatory comments about Wanda. I've been meaning to watch this film for years.
Sure.
I think also obviously pairing it up with the Cassavetes films in terms of kind of talking about what
the time and the way films are made.
The time, the way films are made.
The way she made this film.
The gender politics, obviously, in this film, and how they juxtapose the gender politics in the Cassavetes films.
Right.
So it made kind of an interesting transition.
Also, Richard Brody called her the female Cassavetes.
Oh. Which doesn't really fit.
And also is kind of
dismissive.
I mean, if there was ever clickbait in the cinephile world, calling someone it's very dismissive, because it's defining Barbara Loden through John Cassavetes.
Totally.
Which although she only made one film, it's a pretty singular vision as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
It's a great film, I thought.
It is a great film. Yeah. And I'm also really
a great film.
I'm also really obsessed with those artists who give us and obviously she was an actress, so that clearly is also a part of her art. I mean, her as a director and as a writer, those artists who only make 1 or 2 or 3 masterpieces and then kind of fall silent.
That's what I'm gonna do. Could you give us a quick summary of Wanda?
Yeah, so it's about a woman who's clearly going through some shit.
Right.
She's going through a divorce.
Right.
And the short of it is she kind of wanders around getting into trouble, and eventually she runs into
Big Trouble.
Oh yeah, Big Trouble. She runs into like a petty thief
named Norman Dennis.
And she basically just kind of gets involved in his petty thievery, and they try to rob a bank in the most kind of inept way possible.
I think it's interesting before we jump in, because I realized this during the bank robbery sequence, that this movie came 3 or 4 years after Bonnie and Clyde.
Yes.
Which is a crazy thing to think about.
What was also mind-blowing about this film, and obviously we're recording this after Lebowski, but it's coming out before Lebowski. But what this kind of shared with Lebowski is how subversive it is in terms of bringing all of these different kind of genres together. It's like a film noir. It's like
it's a screwball comedy.
It's like a screwball comedy.
Spoiler alert: we're doing an episode on The Big Lebowski with featuring a very small role with Philip Seymour Hoffman, but that's how the draft went.
But an integral part.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it does. It's a bit of a genre hopper.
Totally, without question. And while I was watching, I was like, holy shit! I thought of Bonnie and Clyde. I thought about Breathless.
Yeah, I thought about a lot of different stuff, and I really liked this film.
So did I, and I'm glad I saw it.
Should we talk our way through it?
We should talk.
Let's go.
So the film begins with these kind of shots of a rock quarry, and which kind of like sets also the kind of working class scene.
Did you think about Woman under the Influence?
Of course.
Yeah. I really did. That was like the first thing I thought about.
That, and again, and I made this joke also in the Woman under the Influence, but also the Flintstones, of course.
Meet Wanda. We don't know Wanda's. Do we know Wanda's last name? Yeah, Gorensky.
Oh, we hear her once or twice.
Oh yeah.
The name stuff was kind of
Wanda. Pretty good.
She also keeps calling. And then she throws out the saber-tooth tiger. She goes, "You're spending the night outside," and then the saber-tooth tiger jumps back inside and throws her out.
Oh, a good Flintstones joke.
And that's some of the screwball comedy they were talking about.
Right, it's really funny. That doesn't happen. We open on a shot of a rock quarry construction going on.
Factories.
We see a dog.
I wrote a note.
You did?
Ooh, there's a dog. Yeah.
I'm gonna let you lead us through.
And then we cut to an interior shot of the house.
Right.
Where Wanda is clearly crashing on a couch.
She's asleep on a couch?
And it seems like it's her sister's house.
I thought it was maybe her brother's house. But maybe it was her sister's. Yeah, it's never made clear.
Yeah, so there's a baby screaming.
Oh, that bummed me out, bud. That made me sad.
You were like flashbacks of 12 hours before, like, oh man.
No, I just my own baby. Kid. Yeah, well, sure that. But
or just the idea of babies crying.
Yeah, but it's upsetting. It's upsetting because like there's a real sense of poverty in those opening moments of the film.
Yes, totally.
You know, and I don't like with a capital P. It feels like a very specific place. This movie has such strong sense of place and location.
And she filmed it in Pennsylvania.
She filmed it in Pennsylvania, Carbondale,
and
Scranton. And you feel that every location in this film is real. And so to begin in a house that is like a very, very
totally
like working class to poor
coal miners.
Coal miner is like it's a lot as a way to start because this movie is really unadorned. It does not romanticize it. It does not romanticize at all the life that these folks are living, which is to its credit is like makes it a better movie.
Yeah, without question. And the reason I think it's her sister is because when the guy leaves, when the husband leaves, he kind of gives like the wife kind of a look,
right?
And he walks past Wanda, who's sleeping on the couch.
And she says he doesn't want me here.
He doesn't want me here, yeah. Which is kind of also one of the, if not the first, but one of the first things obviously she says is that he doesn't want me here, which I think kind of like encapsulates the rest of her wanderings throughout the entire film.
Yeah, that's true.
I just thought of it.
That's really good. You're wicked smart.
Is that why? She's called
it's
Wanda?
Interesting. The film is Wanda. The full title. Did you know that the actual original title was Wanda the Wanderer?
Oh, I did not know.
It's not true because I made that up.
Fuck! I fell for it.
We then immediately cut, speaking of wandering, to this amazing zoom in.
Yes.
Of a person in white who must be Wanda.
It is Wanda,
walking through
these like fields of coal.
And
she's wearing white.
It's really, really incredible.
It's a beautiful, beautiful shot. Yeah, and she totally stands out in the back of this.
Yeah. It's very smart.
Really kind of, again, almost like dystopic looking.
Drinking the coffee, George.
Is it good?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
Thanks,
it's great,
George.
Of course, yeah. It's the drug, it's the caffeine speaking. This kind of dystopic wasteland that actually just is kind of a modern day capitalism. It's just America. And I think what's also interesting about and maybe I'm not being fair to the Cassavetes by saying this, but fuck it. I'm gonna say it anyway.
Sorry, Keith.
The class. Oh, mate, you don't want to go there. The class. Sorry, Keith.
I think this joke was funnier when we didn't know who Keith was.
The class politics in this film are way more, I think, in your face. They feel that way to me than they did in Cassavetes, or at least the only Cassavetes films that I think did that was A Woman Under the Influence, that I think foregrounded it in quite the same way.
I would agree. It's interesting to think about as a filmmaker where you make films defines the kind of films that you make. Mm-hmm. So like if you live in New York and you make films here, a lot of people make films about like struggling artistic people in New York, and like that can get a little exhausting to watch. Yeah. I met with someone recently who was like, if you're working on a script, we talk, don't write me a movie about New Yorkers. Right. Like that's a really fair point to make, because we're a little inundated with it. But also, John Cassavetes is a native New Yorker, moves to LA, and eventually his films become about LA. But it's interesting to track. Maybe there's a middle class quality to Woman Under the Influence, and then after that we get Killing of a Chinese Bookie, which I think has some thoughts about maybe not being middle class, but about like a workaday life and the decisions people make. That movie
totally.
But then, increasingly we get actresses in like these amazing hotels in opening night and love streams, where again, like one of my issues with the movie was the lack of clarity on like where does the money come from. It really bothers me about that movie because, as you said, Woman of the Influence is so self-aware.
I mean, the class is always there, or race, gender, sexuality. Right. These things are always there. It's just how that they're either presented or avoided. Right. That I think is worth talking about. And also right before we see her walking through these kind of like huge fields of coal, we get a quick shot of this random guy. We don't know who he is. He actually stops at the factory and says like, hey, tell Steve I won't be coming to work.
This is something I love about this movie. Sorry to jump on it. Is that, and I don't think, I'm as excited for anyone as Avengers Endgame. I love...
Of course. I just saw Captain Marvel, by the way.
What'd you think? It's okay.
It's okay. I was like, these films are starting to become like joyless, and I don't know if that's me or the films themselves. But I was like, this film didn't strike me as being joyful, and also like, oh my god, like why did they use that Nirvana song?
Oh yeah, the music is bad. I think that Brie Larson is great in the movie.
She's great. Samuel L. Jackson's great in it.
They're all really good.
There's amazing cat acting.
It's a good. Yeah, I was a little underwhelmed by it. Anyway, to come back to it, those movies spend so much time being like, hey, do you know who this person is? Hey, do you know who this person is? And I know it's ridiculous to compare a Marvel film and this movies, but I think that like increasingly movies are working harder to make sure we understand everything. And what was great about these films in this era is that they let you figure it out. There's an elliptical quality to the way the story works, and I think that that's great. Anyway, let's keep moving.
Yeah, no, without question. And I think that you're right. It's also really interesting that, for example, like, I think a contemporary film would have started with like the courthouse scene. So so what happens is we see Wanda,
which is the next scene.
Yeah, we see Wanda wandering. She meets this guy named, I think, Tom, and she asks him for money.
That scene is amazing because that guy is not an actor, but there's all these encounters with randoms in the movie, and they're all great.
And she says it too in the Cavett interview, where all of these, for the most part, almost everybody in the film is a non-actor.
Right.
And this gentleman clearly same thing. And he's just picking up some coal. And she's like, oh, hey, what are you doing? Just picking up some coal. And he's like, yep. And she asks him for some money.
Right.
Apparently, most likely to get on the bus, which she then does, to get to the courthouse.
And in the courthouse, we learn that
the husband's already there,
divorcing her. She sounds a little bit like a deadbeat parent.
Yeah, which is fucking amazing, though. We haven't talked about that, too. Really her rejection of... So she shows up late.
Societal norms,
totally. She shows up late. Mm-hmm. And... obviously, this doesn't look good for her in a court proceeding, but she doesn't care. The judge basically says, like, so how do you feel about this? And she's like, oh, he's a better parent than I am. He should take the kids.
Well, and the movie makes it clear, like, he basically says, I work, but I also do all the child raising. And, I leave for the day and I come home and the kids haven't eaten and there's diapers everywhere and whatever. And, like, to the movie's credit, and I think that it doesn't judge anyone. Like, you feel that this guy is not lying. You feel like he's telling the truth. You know what I mean? Or he's telling the truth from his perspective, and the movie doesn't go out of its way to like make you. It doesn't work for anyone's empathy. It presents like a reality to you that I think is really affecting.
But did you read this scene as her just being so defeated, like that she truly loves her kids and wants to have her kids in her life, and so she just kind of says like, "Oh, I'm defeated. I'm kind of beaten up. I don't want to do this," or did you read it as, let's say, her like, yeah, again, like rejecting societal norms. Because I read it as this moment where she has agency and she says, fuck it, I don't want to do any of that stuff.
I agree. I totally agree with you. I think it's 100% an agency thing. I think it's what she wants.
Yeah, totally.
And but Barbara Loden talks about this in the Cavett interview where she says, like, I made a movie about someone who doesn't know what she wants from her life, which in and of itself is an interesting statement, I think, to think about, because like she's made some decisions that maybe she didn't want to make, and a more sanctimonious movie would like struggle with the really understandable idea that like you have kids, you have fucking responsibility in the world, and like that's true, that's 100% true, but it is a little daring for a film made in 1970 or in 2018 for her to be like, nah, sorry, I'm gonna go.
Totally, without question. It was just funny because I mentioned to my students like the stupid fucking like Murphy Brown controversy of the early 90s with Dan Quayle, where he where he criticized the show because she was a single mom. And to think about this film again, like 20 more years
fuck Dan
Quayle, 20 more years before this.
Yeah.
And to make this kind of decision, it's. Have you ever read Ibsen's Doll's House?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I have an undergrad in theater. You son of a bitch.
Sorry, sir. Sorry.
Have you read Ibsen's A Dollhouse?
Yeah. So there's this guy hundreds of years before Ibsen. This guy named Shakespeare. Do you know?
Shakespeare,
the Shakespeare guy.
You heard this? You heard of the Shakespeare guy?
He also up and coming. This
going
kid.
Places. That kid.
Coming.
Shout out to No Holds Barred Cast, my favorite Shakespeare podcast.
It's hilarious.
Hosted by guys that I went to college with, who also have
are theater
degrees.
You
George,
fucking more.
Yale.
Fuck Yale. They don't have degrees from Yale. Am I right?
Yeah. Wait, no.
Yeah.
It's CUNY.
Hey, you like apples? How about them apples?
That was Harvard, though.
Yeah, I was.
He got like into Harvard.
They're all the Ivies, all the same. So basically, she, and that's the last thing we see of her husband and of her kids. We cut to Wanda in this factory. Great shots of these women working.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah, and like behind sewing machines.
And I think all this is real. These are real places.
Totally.
And like there was she had a crew of 3 people on this movie.
Yeah.
It's so goddamn inspiring. She had a crew of 3 people. I imagine it was the camera person, it was the sound person, and like her. And then maybe one other person, which would be 4. So who knows? I can't count.
I'm really bad too.
So everything else has to just be real people. And she's clearly going into these places and being like, hi, can we do this quick thing?
Without question,
and it's fucking phenomenal. Yeah. It's so good.
Shades also of the Phantom Thread with all these women working on textiles and like making dresses or whatever it is that they're making. And
they're making clothes.
They're making clothes, yeah.
I don't think it's dresses. I don't think it's quite like high society the way that Phantom Thread is.
No slacks. Which cuts to the scene later. Anyway, she walks into her boss's office.
She asks for a job.
She asks
sort
for
of like a part-time job. She seems to work when they need it.
Yeah, and he basically says like,
"You're too slow."
Sorry, there's no work here. You're too slow. And she also asks for like back pay. She's like, "Oh, I don't think I got all my pay." And
she doesn't understand taxes.
And she's like, "No, you got paid."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, like that sucks." Well, this is also I think another interesting moment where it's a clearly could be read as a commentary of how devalued women's work is as well.
Mm-hmm.
The sense of it, she's like, is that all I fucking get?
Next stop is a bar after the factory.
She
has a drink.
This
guy offers to pay for it.
And
an amazing cut to her in bed.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And he tries to run out on her.
And he's like sneaking around trying to get her his clothes. She wakes up, which is I think another fucking like amazing. So we see her twice. We have these very quick cuts. Yeah. Obviously you don't see anything. You don't see any lovemaking or sex. But he said lovemaking. But there are these. It's I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's frank kind of representation of sex and sexuality, and that kind of sense is also powerful and interesting for the time.
No, it is really. Yeah. And the fact that there's like casual nudity and it's not like...
It's not a big fucking deal.
No, it's not a big deal. So then they get in the car. And he drops her off at a Dairy Queen and drives away. Yeah. And I wrote down saddest DQ experience ever because she's just standing there eating a cone of Dairy Queen. Yeah. That, interestingly, we never see her pay for.
Oh, you're right, yeah. I think it's just given to her, like...
It's just given to her, and then... I mean, maybe she does pay. I don't know. But she's got, like, a couple dollars at this point in the movie. And then we go to the mall. And this is when I kind of want to...
Actually, no, she's walking through... First, she goes to the movies.
No, she goes to the mall first.
You're right. She goes to the mall.
And this is interesting because I feel like all of a sudden...
This is also the mall, by the way, that they filmed fucking...
Jackie Brown in?
No, Jackie Brown. Like an amazing movie. fucking the Night of the Living Dead sequel.
Oh, Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead.
Day of the Dead. I've never seen
Day
it.
of the Dead.
So I don't know.
Day of the Dead.
I've never seen any of those movies.
They didn't film that here.
Okay, so you're just being an asshole.
I'm just being an asshole.
So she goes to the mall.
Shades of that, though. Am I right? Shades of that.
Sure. They go to the mall, and one thing that's interesting is I feel like this movie spends a lot of time like in spaces of capital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like a factory, a mall.
Yeah, no, totally.
And the movie does a really nice job of like. One of the things that I find interesting about the movie is how, like, in the scene at home, there's all this Coke. Later on, they're in the hotel, and you see a Skippy jar. Yeah. Like, it just seems to be that, like, the sort of the set deck and the way that the movie is built is that she's doing a very good job of, like, again, creating a sense of place and location.
Yes.
And, like, well, I don't think the movie is necessarily, like, I think it's critiquing life in a way that's a lot less over the top than say other films of this genre, but like it's really subtle how she bakes in. Like she's just walking around a mall looking at these dresses and like
clearly like desiring them,
right?
Like, clearly realizing like that she's not dressed in the same way that these mannequins are kind of dressed, and like understanding that the dresses represent a certain kind of class dynamic, gender dynamic, right? Which again is interesting to parallel it with the scene later.
But you don't
when she meets up with the bank robber and she is able to buy.
And I think also you don't feel like a lesser film would implicate her in these decisions. Where it's like, what's nice about the film is that it's kind of about how everyone here is a victim of like larger circumstances. Yeah. That are a little bit out of their control. So there's it's like a little bit of a larger societal thing than it is just like, look at this individual being a cog in the machine. Like that's boring. It's not interesting, and it lacks for like nuance, I think.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think also because she does such a great job of giving a grounded performance. It's so nuanced. Because at times, yes, like she's kind of naive. At times she's let's say you might want to judge her for the fact that she just kind of like totally abandons her kids, but she's sympathetic throughout.
Yeah, she has a very sympathetic way of being, and it's all written in her facial expressions.
Yeah, without question. And I think the way in which again you like see her desire these dresses says a lot.
So next we're in a movie theater. Yeah. She walks down a street and it's all men. There's no women in the shot.
It's all men
except for one little girl right at the very end, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. And then we end up in a movie theater.
In a movie theater, she's catching this film, a Spanish language film.
Yeah. I was curious what it was.
And a musical, no less. Yeah. But I don't know if it was. I mean, it just also the graininess of the transfer. The film is really grainy, even though obviously
it looks amazing.
It has been kind of
Oh, I'm sorry, it doesn't live up to your digital standards, George.
I was like,
I'm sorry, it was made in 1970.
Where's the fucking high def? Where is?
Why isn't this 4K, bro?
Yeah, what's going on?
If Bellatar can do it, why can't Barbara Loden?
Can we get George Lucas to like spice it up?
The other George, I like to call him.
The other George. Put in some aliens in the background. Yeah. Give us a Wanda special edition.
What if Wanda goes to Mos Eisley Spaceport?
That's what I'm saying.
Amazing.
That's what the film needs to be.
So after the movie theater, she falls asleep in the movie theater and she loses
and she
her
gets
wallet.
Well, I thought the idea was she gets robbed.
Yeah, well, she loses it, so she gets robbed. Someone steals it, but it is lost. It's the same.
Correct.
Well, let's not get into it.
Let's not get into it.
But so she goes to a bar and go ahead.
Oh no, I just want to say about the kind of the graininess and kind of the. It does watching this scene of her in the theater is kind of beautiful because it's you see the
film
screen.
On film.
Yeah, it's film on film, but you see like this screen and it just like looks like this floating face and you can kind of see her silhouette. Anyway, I just thought it was like beautifully composed.
And she's one of the only people in the movie theater.
She's one of the only people in the movie theater.
So after she loses her wallet is stolen, she goes to a bar and she washes her face and she just like kind of stands with her head in the sink and like, you know, in a classical screenwriting sense, this is like a real low point for this character.
Mirror is shattered.
Also, the mirror is shattered, but also the guy who lets her into the bar seems very agitated.
Yes.
And we don't know why. And she goes back to the bar and she's like, "Can I have a drink, a beer?" And then there's this amazing reveal that there's a guy on the floor with like a gag in his mouth. Yeah. And it's the bartender. And you realize without anyone saying anything, this motherfucker is robbing this bank.
Totally.
And it's such a hilarious great reveal. Like, again, a great moment. It's like Barbara Loden should have been able to make more movies.
She should have.
Because she was a really, really good filmmaker. It's like such a well done thing. This guy pours her a beer.
Played by Michael Higgins.
Michael Higgins, who's an amazing actor. a beer, and she's just eating stale chips, and she's like, and I think there's a TV on, and she's just sitting there. It's so great. She's so clueless.
Yeah, she's kind of clueless about, obviously, and he's kind of like nervously looking out the window.
Yeah.
Because obviously he just robbed this place, and then he's
probably walked away with $40. It's so depressing.
Yeah, it's so depressing. And he actually also does. There's only one scene later on. He's a complete piece of shit, but there is one scene later on where he meets up with his dad.
My coffee cup is making noise.
That's kind of
I feel for him a little.
Well, in that scene especially,
he's caught up in some.
You feel for him a little bit, but he's still an awful human being.
He's an abuser and a piece of shit. But this movie lets you make your own decisions.
It's not
about
didactic,
how you feel,
which is exactly what. Yeah, fucking
like Shadows and
with like
Chinese
almost
bookie.
all the Cassavetes films.
Yeah, except for that one where he points to the camera and goes, "Capitalism is bad.
It's bad, people. It's bad.
It's bad.
Also, taxes are bad.
Taxes are bad." So here we go.
So's the deep. I'm just saying. Just have some good ideas. That's all I'm trying to say.
Right.
I'm just saying, if you listen to the other side. Have you
listened to this podcast, InfoWars? We're all lizards, man.
Oh God, that world is so
love that guy.
Dark.
Just kidding.
It's fucking terrifying. So then we cut to,
they go to
a diner.
He
and
brings
this scene
this
is
bank
also
robber named Norman Dennis brings her to a diner.
This scene is also fucking hilarious.
She eats pasta like Charlie Chaplin. It's amazing.
And he's just obviously kind of like nervous and like agitated and looking around. And she's like just pounding this fucking pasta. And she's
Quick
like,
question.
"Are you gonna eat that bread?"
As a guy that's been on a juice cleanse of late, pasta, beer, and cigarettes, greatest meal of all time?
Ooh, I'm not. I prefer wine.
Sure.
I'm a bougie white dude living in Brooklyn.
Yeah. You're not really a beer drinker.
Well, actually, maybe I'm going against the trends because all these like people with like their microbrews and like
that's cool.
I only drink like beers that are like
brewed
done in small batches.
Brewed down the street from my apartment.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Double IPAs, and I want my mouth to taste like hate.
I only drink beers that are brewed within a 5-block radius
of my apartment.
Would you like some of my my honey? I grew it myself on my rooftop with my bees.
Oh my God!
Although the bees are dying, we need to save them.
It's not
Seriously,
great.
Yeah.
Beer, cigarettes, pasta. Like the idea that she has, like I was like, holy shit, she's smoking a cigarette. Like, like again, it's one of these.
She's doing it.
The movie does this interesting thing. It sets you up in this. She's in such a desperate state that like, hell yeah, I'm gonna smoke cigarettes, eat up 2 bowls of pasta, and drink like 4 beers. That's what I would do. I mean, I would do that anyways, and I'm not hurting for money.
I would definitely. That's me. I would definitely take the bread and scoop up all that.
Oh hell yeah, from somebody
sauce.
else's dish.
And then we have another scene where we quickly cut, and she's in bed with this guy. Clearly they've slept together. She asks him about his wedding ring, which is also another really interesting moment where they're kind of juxtaposed, where they're both clearly married.
Yeah.
And obviously, for whatever reasons, they've left their significant others.
Yeah, they're like loners.
Yeah,
and he tells her to go,
wanderers.
And at this point, he seems agitated, so he tells her to go get some.
Always agitated.
He tells her to go get some food, burgers.
3 hamburgers.
3 burgers with none of the crap on them, so no onions. Who doesn't have onions on a burger?
I love onions on a good veggie burger, of course.
Yeah, of course. But regardless, no matter whether you eat a veggie burger, a chicken burger, a turkey burger, an ostrich burger, you gotta have onions on that burger.
Go on.
Onions.
No, like a camel burger.
Are there camel burgers?
Kangaroo burger. I've eaten camel before.
Have you? I've eaten horse
in Australia. That's all we got.
That's cool.
So then she is told to go out and get also a newspaper because he wants to find out if news of his robbery is in the news. She brings back hamburgers. There's stuff on them. He gets pissed at her.
He hits her.
It's
awful.
Yeah, and also again the subtlety. Obviously, there's nothing subtle about a man hitting a woman, but the fact that the scene goes on for a couple of like minutes, and she's like holding her cheek, and at some point after like
these are long scenes.
Yeah, she says something like, "Oh, like my face still hurts." Yeah, it's like so well done, and it feels so visceral and real.
It's great.
It's great.
Do we go to a church next?
Well, we cut with the church bells.
Yeah.
Where it's like right across the street, apparently.
And he's looking at the church sort of like with, I don't know, he seems guilty about something.
And we go to a church later.
Right, but it's a different, this is a different
We should also say, by the way, that when Wanda goes out to get the hamburgers, he looks out the window, and apparently she talks to some guy for a brief couple of seconds.
And he's bothered by it.
Because, again, he's a possessive, terrible...
Mofo.
Fucking human being.
Right.
We then cut to them in the street.
he's trying to steal a car.
He steals a car.
And he finally finds an open door. Not much of a thief. He just looks for an open door.
He's successful. Well, does he? It's weird. Does he like hotwire it or something? It's hard to tell.
He hotwires it, but then the keys are above. She's like, "Don't you need these?" Yeah. He's like, "Shut up."
This is where Terminator 2 steals that scene, right? Where
probably,
of course.
For sure.
And they're driving around.
Right. And she's reading the news story.
Yeah.
I found this moment very convoluted, that she reads the news story and she now understands that he's a robber.
And he's kind of excited by it.
Yeah. Titillated. But then the shots in the car are totally amazing.
Because she's looking back wistfully. And kind of obviously from where they're driving away. And it's like, clearly this kind of sense of.
But just the idea that like she's like, oh my God, I'm reading a newspaper article basically about myself or whatever. It's kind of just like. It's not bad. I mean, the movie
convoluted. You just meant in the sense like, how does she now realize it?
Just feels like it feels like one of the few screenplay moments in the whole movie. Because this is a movie that it begins as like kind of a neo-realist thing, a little bit. It has this quality or documentary or whatever you want to use to imply that it feels real, which like is a loaded term, but is important. And then about 40 minutes into the film, all of a sudden we're in a crime drama that we were not in before. And what's great about the movie is that it's a crime drama that seems born out of circumstance a little bit. Like this is just the place people are in their lives, and that's really interesting as opposed to Bonnie and Clyde, which is like a bit of a romantic representation until the end of that stuff.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden to have her read an article and realize what's going on feels like a hair convoluted. But whatever.
And I'm glad you mentioned Bonnie and Clyde because this is definitely like the anti-Bonnie and Clyde because there's nothing sexy about what's unfolding before our eyes.
So all of a sudden we're now at a weird spot, a hideout with an older man who there's booze and gun on the table. It's very American.
Yeah, totally.
And he's Norman Dennis, our gentleman seems to be.
It's like a former associate or
something? He seems to be wanting this guy to drive in a bank robbery for him, I think. And the guy's like, no, I have a kid now. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And Norman Dennis like doesn't even finish his drink, just gets up and leaves. And Wanda's laying on the background there.
Yeah. And that's another thing, too. At this point, also, it's definitely become like a road trip movie as well.
Yeah, it's a bit of a road movie around Pennsylvania, I guess.
They stop for liquor. He clearly robs this place as well.
He has a bad headache.
And he starts kind of
a really bad headache. Yeah. This guy needs to hydrate. He's got headaches, but all he's drinking is fucking Jack Daniels.
Yeah. Did people know in the 1970s that they needed to hydrate?
Probably. I feel like this is not a 2008 discovery.
Yeah.
Guys, you should be hydrating.
Well, no, maybe more like 1980s. So then we cut to. Sorry,
but there's a really interesting scene here where. She says there's a bit where they're talking, and she says something like, I guess I'm dead. Oh, and I thought that was really interesting because it made me think about the bathroom scene in Husbands when they're talking about their bodies decomposing, but because she has nothing, she's dead.
Right.
Like that film is all about this anxiety of like, what's happening to my body?
I thought that happened later. Sorry, when they buy this stuff too and they're trying on their clothes, and he says...
It's a little bit earlier.
Okay. And he says something like, if you don't have anything, you're dead.
Nothing. Yeah. And like, so this idea of like being dispossessed is really interesting.
Without question.
Like as opposed to like, the sort of male anxiety of like my body's falling apart because I'm abusing it. She's like, well, I don't have a job, I don't have a husband, I don't have kids anymore. Like I'm meaningless. Like,
but I also
an idea.
Yeah, I also thought it was again, I could be misremembering, but I thought it was in a discussion of like literally ownership over things, which I also took to be kind of a critique of capitalism, kind of the sense like if you don't have things, if you don't own shit.
I think it's both, right? I think
you're right.
I think that like when you talk about that idea, I think it's simple to say it's just not simple, you fucking simpleton, but I think it's more complex to think of like those things as a natural extension of my family, my life, my job as like parts of a whole in terms of like they're defined by like the way we have to have things in order for them to play out. And it's just interesting because there's like a way that you think about her as a character in terms of her, again, it's like her relationship to her. She's a wanderer. She doesn't have stuff. And like, does that make her quote unquote dead? It's just very interesting. Then they go shopping.
Well, right before that, there's also this really like, almost kind of playful scene where they stop at another like rock quarry, and there are these kids playing with this remote control plane.
Oh yeah.
And he's like running around and like yelling at the kids and yelling at the plane. She's kind of lying on the hood of the car, and it's beautifully shot.
And it's kind of he's kind of nice to her in this scene.
Yeah.
And this is when they talk about.
But he's also like messing around with her hair, and he's like, you should wear a hat. And
yeah.
Like, you should do something with your hair.
Yeah.
You should mess around. So even when he's being to some degree tender, he's also obviously being a fucking judgmental prick. And then shopping.
Shopping.
He's walking around the parking lot. he
steals
some shit from a car. Wanda we don't see her shopping, but we see her come out with new clothes. They're in a Woolworths,
like a big supermarket.
I can never say it. Woolworths.
Interesting that this is the first time there's a scene where she goes into like a store or a shop, but we stay with Norman Dennis as opposed to going in with her.
Yeah, yeah. And then she comes out and she's wearing slacks. Right. And he's like, I told you to get a dress. And she's like, oh,
there's one in the bag.
I decided to buy this stuff too.
And then we go down the road and you see...
He fucking throws her slack. She changes, clearly. We don't see her change, but she changes in the car.
He throws the slacks out the window.
And he says, no slacks.
So what's going on here? Is he trying to turn her into his, like...
Totally, yeah.
New partner? Or, like... Well, I mean, it's possessive, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally what it is. It's that this kind of... him trying to impose a traditional kind of idea of femininity on her.
Or and he's just kind of trying to drive the... Yeah. He wants to be in charge. He can't not be.
He wants to be in charge.
Right.
It's the Vertigo moment of the movie.
Ooh. And then he says, no questions.
No questions. He wants her to be wearing a dress.
Well, they talk about spouses.
And this is where they pull over, right? Or they're
pulling out and they're kind of going through the things they bought, whatever. Yeah. And he asks about her husband and her kids because he saw the pictures of them in the wallet. Yeah. And it's kind of a weird moment because, I feel as though throughout this, she endears herself to him just by like the way she is. And like, it's worth noting Barbara Loden is like a pretty blonde woman.
She is, yeah.
Totally. And it's like, I think it does something interesting for the film because she's sort of like, she's a little bit lost. The character of Wanda is a little bit lost in the film. Mm-hmm. By the end, she's really gone through some stuff. But I think that you can make assumptions about her are made because she's blonde and pretty. Yeah. And she's much more interesting than that, obviously, and it's an unfair kind of generalization to make. But she endears herself, and I think that he's asking about the family and kids because he kind of wants that stuff to disappear.
Ah, okay, yeah, like a blank slate kind of thing. So, do you think he really is into her though, in that kind of sense, that he wants like to remake her as?
I think it has gives the movie wife? A little more dimension. Makes him a more interesting character a little bit. If you think about, I don't know. There's a lot more to that. There's a lot of quiet to that performance that he gives that I think implies that. I mean, and I think as an actor, it's a more interesting choice to want to, like, kind of own or control someone, but also feel deeply for them. And I think it comes through in the performance.
And then there's this great scene where they're driving away again in the car, and he grabs her thighs.
Well, she says, like, where are we going? And he says, no more questions from you, and then grabs her legs.
It's very creepy. Yeah, totally. But also when you juxtapose it with kind of the lack of slacks, and it's kind of interesting to think about it as an image of, like, not only just control, but also this creepiness, possession of her body, without question.
And then we go
to the city.
Where all of a sudden we're in a bank, and this scene is interesting because you just watch him watching a bank manager, but nothing else happens.
Does he make a deposit? I thought
he makes a deposit, but it seems to be a very sort of like as a cover,
perfunctory.
It's unclear to us why we can understand, but like he seems fixated on this one bank manager, which we'll come to in a little bit. And then we go to this totally crazy part of the movie. They go to a church.
To this church.
This really weird church that has to be a real place in the middle of Pennsylvania. Yeah, it's like I wrote down a Christ amusement park.
Yes, that's fucking a Christ amusement park, exactly. Because while Dennis is talking
to an older man who we understand to be his father.
She's taking a tour of
catacombs.
But they're
like fake. They probably are like they're fake catacombs.
Oh no, totally. Yeah.
In the sense that like they're probably like based on like an American perception of what like a catacomb. Where does the Last Crusade take place?
Well, at the end.
The catacomb part.
Shit. It's Venice, isn't it?
Venice, right.
Yeah,
so clearly, like, someone went to Venice and was like, we can make some money off this if we, like, model it in Pennsylvania. Like, kind of middle America kitsch. Yeah. The grossest kind of... It, like, made me a little mad.
These people didn't even visit the catacombs in Wildwood, New Jersey, which are famous for all the dead martyrs, as we all know, that are buried in the catacombs over there.
Sure, absolutely. I was really...
Hey, fuck you, Jersey,
I'm
right?
Dumb.
You ain't gone...
No, come on.
You ain't gone...
Jersey's our neighbor to the direction Jersey's in. Hey, fuck you. I love you. So she takes this tour, and then I thought this moment was specific because this place has to really exist.
Yeah. Wait, sorry. The
Christ amusement park.
Oh, the Christ amusement
really
park
has to exist.
And there is this interesting discussion about like martyrs and saints.
Yep, and clearly there's a tour going on at these catacombs, and that's clearly a real person, and she's just Barbara Loden is just taking the tour in character. It's a great. There's not enough of these in movies anymore where like it seems like she was like, oh, we got to do this. This is like no, like
taking
with, like this
in
verisimilitude, like this real place, and make it part of the film. And while this is happening, Norman Dennis is talking to his dad.
And this is one of the only scenes of him where you like kind of feel for the guy.
Yeah, he hasn't seen his dad in a while.
He tries to give him money, and the dad's
like, "Do you have a job?"
Yeah, because clearly also the dad knows that it's probably gone by ill-gotten means.
Right. No, he says, "I don't want your money."
Yeah, he's like, "I don't want your money," or something. And he says like, "You haven't been good."
He says you haven't been good. And he says, "Dad, I'll be back in a week," which is definitely not true. And it's really sad because the dad is like, there's not a lot of dialogue exchange, but you get a real sense of history between these two guys. And again, huge credit to this movie that it can do so much with so little.
Totally.
Because it's exceptionally well executed and edited.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really effective part of the film.
It's also interesting too because the dad clearly has some kind of accent. So there's clearly like, I mean, obviously you could read it as kind of a commentary on like the immigrant experience in America. We didn't really know where this guy's roots are, or what his ethnicity is. Yeah.
So we quickly cut back to a hotel.
Yeah.
And he's working on the bomb.
This is where we're like, is he making a bomb? And he was making a bomb.
Right.
And also like, oh, Wanda's pregnant. No, she's not. Because for a second I was like, did like 4 or 5 months pass?
Yeah, she comes inside and he's making a bomb.
He's making a bomb.
It's unclear. I didn't realize that's what he was doing until later, but yeah, of course.
She has a pillow under her shirt, which is also kind of funny because so clearly they're planning this bank heist.
Right.
And yeah, then and I was like,
so is she doing that to make it look like they're like an respectable couple?
I think
or something like that? Yeah, of course.
Something along those lines. Yeah, and I think also like if she is going to play the role of his like accomplice, like, I think having her play the role of like a pregnant woman makes her
totally an
easier kind of a more invisible, lets her more sympathetic to kind of like
interesting.
Do whatever the fuck it is that he wants her to do.
She comes over and she's like, I don't want to. She hands him a piece of paper and he says, read it.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't want to do this. And he pokes her in the stomach, but it's almost a little bit affectionately. Like, again, it's still threatening, but I feel different. Not that I think that he's any less of a piece of shit, but I think that, again, she's endeared herself because that guy's a bully and will forever be a bully. And his behavior is completely unacceptable. But there's a little bit of nuance into the way he's physical with her that it wasn't before. So it's like, it's interesting to think of. I mean, he doesn't care about her, but he cares about her. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at this point, she's looking at this card. She's like trying to read it. Like 1, gain entry to the house. 2, or 1, go to the house. 2, gain entry to the house. Like clearly a plan is going on, but we don't know what it is. And they're going through it. And she's in the bath and she's trying to remember the steps. And she's like, I don't want to do this. And then in the next scene, she's throwing up. Mm-hmm. And we see he has a gun. And she's throwing up because she's nervous. And he's like, cut it out, whatever. What are we doing? And then, so we know something's going on. But then all of a sudden, we're in a backyard pond. Right. And these 2 young girls are splashing. And at this point, you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Also, by the way, Shades of Godard saying all you need to make a movie is a girl and a gun. Yeah.
Fuck Godard.
Fuck Godard. And
just kidding.
Great filmmaker, but like a terrible human being.
Well,
he's okay. He had some decent ideas.
Is he a terrible human being?
Well, I think kind of like he's notoriously like mean to Agnes Varda.
Yeah, did you see that Faces Places?
Yeah. But I think
we haven't said it yet. Rip Agnes Varda.
Yeah, rest in peace.
One of the greatest of all time.
We tweeted about it though.
Yeah, but she's a goat.
She is. Yeah,
she's amazing. I love her so much.
And then we cut to these women swimming, and we find out quickly that this is Mr. Anderson.
Who's the bank manager.
He's the bank manager.
And they walk in with a gun.
And this is also really an interesting moment because Dennis totally fucks it up.
Right.
And Wanda saves him, right? Like the gun drops, she grabs the gun, and she kind of like reasserts authority or kind of in the scene. So she helps him.
She's like, get over there. And the wife is there.
And they tie up the family, and Dennis puts the bomb in front of them.
Which is so clearly a fake bomb. It's such a fake bomb.
It says Acme on it.
It basically should say like by Dennis, but like the Y is facing the wrong way, and the D is like backwards. Like, it's so fake. I mean, let me be clear.
I ordered this from the Acme Corporation.
With a gun
and
they were like, I'm putting a bomb on your lap, I probably wouldn't be like, this is fake, motherfucker. But it's such a fake bomb.
And he sets the time.
It has like an alarm clock on it.
He sets the time for like an hour, and he's like,
hour 15.
I'll be back in an hour and 15.
And you're like, when this bomb doesn't go off, cool, Dennis. And he brings the bank manager to the bank.
Correct. And they're driving. So Dennis, bank manager in one car, Wanda's tailing them in the other car.
She gets pulled over.
So clearly she's going to be like the getaway car or something?
Right, she's the getaway car driver. Well, because he couldn't get that other guy to do it.
Yeah, and she loses them. She loses track of them.
And then she catches up with them again.
Well, no, she pulls in. Yeah, well,
but then a cop pulls her over.
She does like an illegal U-turn.
Yeah.
And the cop pulls over. You can't
Poor
do fucking
Wanda.
Especially when the fucking popo around.
All right, calm down.
Careful. You gotta be careful.
In these small towns in Pennsylvania.
So Dennis is then
brings the guy into the bank.
Like,
the guy informs the staff, like, listen, we have a holdup.
Right.
The old cop gives them the gun. Everyone gets under their desks. There's a really hilarious shot
of them under their
everyone
desks.
under their desks with their legs sticking out, and like it's really funny.
The editing is great.
It's a cross-cutting. It's a really effective cross-cut between the bank and Wanda.
Right, and she's getting written up for obviously making an illegal U-turn. Keep cutting back to the bank.
She doesn't have her wallet.
As soon as they open
you're kind of like.
As soon as they open the vault, another cut to an alarm going off and a dispatcher. Basically calling it in.
And this is just clear how much of a noob this guy is at robbing banks.
Yeah.
And it's like a DIY bank robbery. There's two of them. They're not ready to do it.
Totally. And then, basically the cops show up.
And he resists arrest and pulls his gun and starts shooting.
And he gets killed.
Yeah. And she runs over to the bank and starts crying because she can't get in.
Right. At that point, the cops are
very suspicious. I would be like, why is this woman crying? And for this, where are you an accomplice? And that's where the cover art for the film comes from. It's a really evocative shot because you see a woman crying and you see the badge on the cop's shoulder, which I didn't realize until I looked hard at it. I was like, oh shit.
That's where,
and then all of a sudden we're in a bar.
We're in a bar. She's watching
the news coverage of Dennis's death. Right. He dies in the hospital. Would the news really feature the shot of a body on the ground?
Oh, maybe 1970.
Maybe, I think it was a different less
times.
sanitized kind of news.
Different
times. As our buddy InfoWars host name I don't remember.
Let's not name that piece of shit.
Yeah, fuck him.
Yeah. So then
she has a couple drinks with this guy.
A soldier.
A soldier.
Yeah, because he's wearing some sort of kind of uniform, and clearly she's
Americana. He's got a Corvette. And he's a soldier.
Commentary on Vietnam, perhaps.
Not really.
And then, not really. And then, well, she's clearly also depressed, yeah, and saddened obviously by the news.
She cares about his dad.
Yeah, and then we cut to them driving in this like really beautiful red car, and again like in another quarry. They pull over.
He makes a move. He kind of pins her down.
Yeah. The way this is shot too is like amazing. At first, also you think like, okay, maybe she wants this, but clearly she does not.
No, she fights him off, and it's a good moment of agency in the movie because she hasn't had a lot of agency.
And the way it's shot is amazing because so the camera's kind of like from his back.
Yeah,
so we don't
and sort of slight tilt down.
Yeah, he pins her down and. Yeah, and then after a couple of seconds, doesn't cut. She kind of like fights him off.
Yeah,
but it's like amazing because she kind of like just arises from beneath him.
Yeah,
and like almost like jumps at the camera
and gets out of the car. Yeah,
she runs out of the car, runs into the woods. Yeah. Clearly, that's kind of like moment of to some degree some freedom, even though it's
awful. But
awful.
She's escaped this guy, and he doesn't chase her.
Yeah, thankfully,
as far as we know.
And she falls. She hurts herself a little bit. And then we cut to like this really like weird kind of final scene where we don't know where she is.
Right.
She's wandering outside of this house, and she just kind of like parks herself outside of this house, and she's like smoking, I think. And there's a woman, or maybe she's not smoking, but there's a woman who sees her, walks like past her, sees her, walks into the house.
Comes back out.
Sees her, yeah. The woman like opens up, like peeks outside from the window at top, sees the one that's still there, comes back out, opens up a cigarette. And says like, oh, like engages with her and says kind of like, hey, what are you doing? Like, who are you? But not like in any sort of like mean judgmental way.
No, it's actually the first time she gets taken in by a woman as opposed to a man.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's clearly what you're supposed to take from the scene.
Clearly.
It's kind of like female solidarity. And then we cut to the bar from Husbands. And Wanda and this woman are there.
And there's these dudes drinking.
Did
this movie make you want a beer? It made me want a beer.
It made me want wine. It made me want solid food because I was still...
Oh, you're still on your juice.
I'm still about 12 hours away from being able to eat solid food.
Have you eaten a meal yet today?
Yeah.
What'd you eat?
Oh, my God. Something from Dizzy's.
Ooh.
Tio's Eggs.
What is that?
This podcast brought to you by Dizzy's, a finer diner.
Was it good?
It was fucking amazing. It was the first like kind of real solid food I've had
eggs?
in 72 hours. Yep, eggs and focaccia.
Ooh. Your blood sugar is going to go crazy.
It was glorious.
Glorious. So then they're in a bar, and she's just sitting there depressed, and she's smoking a cigarette.
And like eating like a hot dog.
This woman is like animated. She's talking to these guys. She eats a hot dog. It's so sad. Hot dogs are gross.
There's some really like great like Harlan County, USA-esque music playing, a live band there.
What year did Harlan County come out?
Yeah, I wanted to actually look that up.
Might be an interesting...
I think a couple of years after
I think that's true.
But clearly also I was thinking a lot about that film.
Yeah, sure.
While watching this. And then the final shot is...
a little bit of a 400 blows. Made me think about that. Just the freeze frame. Yeah. I don't think it's intentional, and I don't seek to compare Barbara Loden to Francois Truffaut. That's boring, but it is interesting that there is a freeze frame on Wanda's face as she smokes a cigarette.
Yeah, and that's where the film ended. Harlan County, 1976.
Okay, so interesting.
And obviously same geography, right? Same, Appalachia.
Yeah, exactly.
And the film ends, and it ends on this final shot of like Wanda looking like just depressed. What do you think
we're supposed to feel at the end of this film?
I think you're supposed to feel a lot of things. I think you're supposed to feel, well, like I wrote in my notes, and I really believe this, like she's been beaten up, she's been betrayed, she still doesn't know what she wants out of life. She's depressed, but also she's still alive. And there's a bit of, I think, triumph in that, like that it freezes on her like face in that kind of way.
You know, presumably she's like not gonna fall in with a lunatic again because she's been through it.
It's funny because I don't agree with that, but it's funny to think like to what degree, like I thought the final scene was going to be like her going back home, at least her sister. And it was almost, and obviously this doesn't happen, so maybe even making the comparison isn't fair, but reminiscent of the final scene in Faces, where the question is asked of like, is this something that's cyclical? Has this happened before, obviously in a lesser sort of way? Obviously I'm not saying she's always hooking up with bank robbers and almost getting into crimes.
It happens to the best of us.
But I think like for the idea that it was in this kind of obviously most likely terrible marriage, and then she hooks up with this random guy at the first bar, and then she hooks up with this terrible piece of shit dentist, that to some degree there's an implication that I read it as like this wandering will continue, even though she'll live on, she'll still exist. Oh, but maybe also the kind of fighting off the soldier. I will
say it doesn't have a hopeful ending.
It doesn't have a hopeful ending.
But the fighting off of the soldier is a good sign. Is a big deal. Well, it's just that it just shows a sense of agency that maybe she didn't feel she had.
Correct.
In the film.
Well, yeah, but again, I read her abandoning her husband and her kids as that kind of agency.
That's true. That's a very good point. But then, maybe that makes it a more realistic movie because a traditional movie arc is like someone learns a lesson.
Oh,
and then they
of course.
Change. Whereas like, maybe there's a more cyclical quality to what this film has to say, which in a way is more realistic because people don't change that much that quickly. That's one of the great myths of filmmaking is that people change that quickly, in my opinion.
No, totally.
Let's real quick talk about the the Criterion channel has a bonus feature, which is
they have so many good bonus
features. Great app. Really love it. Please,
I want free stuff.
Yeah, we'd like to. We'd also like you to be a sponsor. I love you. Let's talk a little bit about this Dick Cavett interview,
which is so awkward.
So awkward. I think part of the reason it feels awkward is because at the very beginning, Dick Cavett comes on strong, trying to, I think, be an ally. If that's the thing. I think Dick Cavett was a pretty open-minded guy.
Yeah,
because, making films is hard. It's especially hard if you're a woman. And our next guest, Barbara Loden, made this film Wanda. Here she is. She's very attractive. Yeah. And you're like, really?
Like that's where you go.
I mean, of course, and it's the time, and it is what it is. Yeah. But to say like, here's the very attractive Barbara Loden, and like.
Well, what's really interesting that one of the first questions he asked is like how difficult it is as a woman to make a film.
And
to
be a woman.
She's like it's just difficult to make films in general. Which I read also is kind of, I mean, maybe that's not totally fair like to Loden, but I think she's just kind of like rejecting that classification, just being like, listen, like I'm a filmmaker, perhaps I'm not like. I don't want to be known as like a female filmmaker.
Yeah, and that again, that's a little bit. I mean, she's very different than her character in the film, which is obvious, and not to imply that like she was playing like that. I don't know if necessarily you'd say that like, wow, John Cassavetes was so different in Husbands than he was in real life. But what's interesting, I think, always is the stark contrast between actors and the characters they play, and like she comes off as very on point, very confident. She knows what she's doing, and she's also not going to put up with bullshit. And I actually think. Cavett, as wonderful as he is, the guy doesn't relate to her in quite the same way that the other guest, who's a screenwriter, relates to her.
Yeah. Well, he has interesting things to say. Who, the screenwriter for what? Did you know who that guy was?
I actually should have looked it up. I didn't get a chance to. I wish, one small thing, it might be interesting if with the Criterion Collection stuff, if they provide context for who the people are, because the clip kind of begins in media res, so it's like.
And the guy next to him, I think, was Howard Cosell. I was like, holy shit, is that Howard Cosell?
Howard Cosell. Yeah. He's in Ali, that great Michael Mann film.
Yeah. So, shit, what do I want to say about? Oh,
well, it's just an awkward interview. It's mildly combative.
She's rejecting labels. So at some point he says, like, so you grew up poor? And she's like, I wasn't poor.
No, and he says, did you grow up in Appalachia or whatever? And she's like, no, I grew up in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, she's kind of like, I didn't want to make this film about. I don't know. I think that Dick Cavett is trying to give her easy, it's like, not softball questions, but like
sympathetic questions.
And I don't think she really has the energy for it.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe the class thing also, and again, I didn't know a lot about, obviously, Loden as a person, but I also read it as, like, this defensiveness of, like, because she says, like, oh, like, the people back home would want to be described as poor, which is totally understandable.
Right. She also talks a little bit about her filmmaking method, which I think is interesting. Yeah. That she's like, we made a sign. We went to these like small towns and we made a sign that's like, if you want to be in a movie, come to like the library on Saturday morning. Local radio station. And she was like, all these kids came. It's like, we didn't need the kids, but we got the parents to do it. And it's just so like, she had a crew of 3 people. It's obviously a small thing. The film was made for $100,000, and they're both like, that's a lot of money. And she's like, right, but I paid people. And it's like, with all the conversation around this stuff going on now, and all of it is really justified, this is a great interview, because in 1970 there was this woman who was like, I'm going to make a really great piece of film with 3 people, but everyone's going to get paid. I'm going to spend all my money on getting people paid.
By the way, Liam, the check you wrote me for all the podcasting I've been doing, it bounced. So can we just talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about it off air. No, we'll get it off air. It's fine.
Oh, I may want more check bounce too.
Keith, get out of here. Hello! Oh no, everyone's here.
It's Marty.
But yeah, I just think it's interesting, and I just think that like, I don't really know that Dick Cavett and her really ever get comfortable with one another.
Well, also, he was clearly bullshitting her when he said, she plays the clip, and he's like, "Oh, that was you?" Was he being honest?
Oh, I don't know. That bothered me.
That bothered me. I was like, wait, is he? Because she plays a clip. She's obviously in the clip because she's in like 99% of the film.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, was that you?"
Well, he also says in the interview, so tell me about what Wanda's about. Like, he hasn't seen it.
Yeah. It's clear because...
Which is frustrating.
He says, because he says, like, oh, it's about a woman who's a bank robber. And she's like,
no, it's about a woman that falls in with a bank robber. I also think that, like, probably very rarely does the host of a show that airs 4 nights a week get a chance to consume all of the things that the people that they have on have made. But he doesn't even seem to be trying a little bit.
He doesn't, yeah.
And then after they watch the clip, he says, so you're married to Elia Kazan, right? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, did he help you?
Oh, yeah. I was like, what was that like?
But it's like, I don't know. It's just maybe again, this is a good example of looking at it through a present lens.
There's some great essays on the Criterion website about... from a whole bunch of different kind of academics and thinkers and artists about this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but somebody writes basically like somebody writes something interesting about like Kazan, because at some point like Kazan said something really shitty about like, oh yeah, I kind of let her make that film, and it was kind of like her thing to do. It was almost like as if he was kind of like throwing her a bone, which is totally shitty.
Yeah.
Of course. And
how many Elia Kazan movies are in the Criterion collection?
I don't know.
Probably 1 or 2. Maybe Streetcar. I don't know. We should look it up.
Waterfront.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It could have been somebody, George.
Could have been somebody. Well, you are. I mean, you have a podcast.
That's true. I have a hit podcast with dozens of downloads.
But somebody on that, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name, but it was like, oh, that. She basically read like Dennis's character's like the no slacks kind of like statement. That's kind of like Kazan.
We should, if you can find it, let's include a link to that essay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We'll do notes. Get on it, Fragopolis.
I'm on it, sure.
Yeah, but overall, it feels. It does feel a little reductive of an interview, but I think that it's also just interesting to. Barbara Loden has no fucks to give, and I think that's great. And it's also,
it's sad that she didn't make.
A moment of pause. Yeah, she died of breast cancer.
She died of not 48.
Very young.
Super fucking young.
And she was working on a few other projects.
Yeah, I started watching. I only got about 15 minutes in. The Criterion also has a documentary about her. I think it's called I Am Wanda.
Yeah. How is it?
It was. I mean, it was interesting. But again, I only got into like 15 minutes. But it was. They filmed her. They talked to her 3 months before she died. So
3 months.
Yeah. So clearly she knew that she was dying, and that's.
Sad.
It was kind of this her opportunity to kind of like sum up her like body of work and her life. But I also want to track down those. She made 2 short films.
Yeah,
should be interesting. Also,
I hope that those end up on the Criterion channel. Yeah. But really, Wanda is like it's been, and then people have been talking about it a lot the past few months because it got this restoration, and it is absolutely worth a watch. I think it's a great movie.
It's a great movie.
It's a really, really great movie. Well, let's wrap it up here. A couple weeks from now, we will be getting our Philip Seymour Hoffman. And our first episode is on
The Big Lebowski.
The Big Lebowski.
We have some interesting things to say about The Big Lebowski. Can I just say one more thing about Wanda?
Yeah.
The chair's not creaking.
George is trying to make the chair creak. This is fucking ridiculous. I'm Liam Billingham.
I got some good creaking in there. I'm George Creaky Frigopoulos.
George Creaky. Yeah, you should hear what happens when he stands up. I'm Liam Billingham.
I'm George Frigopoulos.
And this was
Hoover Busters.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right, Reagan.
Like
Reagan was like, "You need to hydrate." That was a terrible Ronald Reagan.
Liam Billingham's